Hello. So today we're going to be talking about what happens when you split up with somebody and your brain goes into over-analysis mode, and we're also going to talk about a model of therapy that was developed by a lady called Connie Ray Andreas called parts therapy. A friend of mine, a female friend of mine, a girlfriend, has a problem at the moment in that she recently split up with her fella, and her brain is doing the monkey dance post-breakup, post-mortem, where what your brain will do is it will keep going back over and looking at all the broken pieces of the relationship and going through the detritus and the corpses and the arguments and the emails and the WhatsApp messages and looking for clues. It goes into detective mode, like a neurotic detective mode. And she said, this is self-destructive. And to me, she said, I want this to stop, it's self-destructive. And I said, yes, I know it feels very self-destructive, but actually it's your brain trying to protect itself. And she said, no, it's not trying to protect me, this is self-destruction. If we assume for a second, one of the assumptions of certain models of therapy, like neurolinguistic programming, is that every behavior has a positive intent. No matter how twisted that behavior or how self-destructive it might appear to be, it has a positive intent to the person doing it. Smoking, the positive intent is that you relax and that you calm down. Overeating, the positive intent is that you feel less anxious and it makes you feel more calm and more stable. Whatever it is, no matter how horrible or criminal or sadistic it might seem, there is a positive intent there for the individual. Now, where does Connie Ray Andreas and her model of therapy fit into this? She came up with something called parts therapy. I think Connie Ray Andreas is actually originally one of the first NLP practitioners from back in the day, and her idea, her concept, which I think is incredibly powerful, was that your brain, I tend to say brain rather than mind. The reason why I say brain is because it's a pH neutral word, more so than mind or ego. I hear people talking about the ego and then it all gets a bit confusing and mishmashed. If I say brain, what I'm talking about is actually the meat. I'm talking, as Terence McKenna would have it, the meat of consciousness, localized consciousness. Why? Because there we can actually see evolution. We can see the old brain, the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and then the human brain, and we can actually localize where certain memories and certain behaviors and certain practices take place, and we can localize the formation of skills and beliefs and behaviors and all the rest of it via neural networks. We can actually track the development of neural pathways in the same way that we can track the development of muscle. So I say brain for that reason. And I also tend to say in therapy quite a lot, your brain is not your friend, not all the time. Another way of saying it is it's a great tool, it's a great servant, but it's a very poor master. Your brain will tend towards repetition. Your brain will tend towards certain default settings that don't help you. The software faults that we have, the cognitive biases that we tend towards, I think I put the blame in the brain because it is part of the individualized survival mechanism of the human being that's based on being evolved in an environment of scarce resources, and it makes us a bit weird. We tend to focus on the negative rather than the positive, and we are more motivated to run away from pain than we are to run towards pleasure. I blame this on the brain. I blame this on the survival mechanism that evolved in a very harsh environment. So why do we focus on, I'm sweating, terribly sorry darlings, it's very hot in Malaysia today. Why does this happen? So your brain has actually evolved to keep you alive, to keep you safe. So it's obsessed with pain. It's obsessed with discomfort. Why do you think people are addicted to gossiping? Why do you think they're addicted to drama? Your brain, unfettered, undisciplined, is obsessed with pain. Other people's pain, your pain, suffering. It thrives on suffering. And given that that's the software mechanism that we're working with, is it any wonder that people so frequently engage in self-destructive behaviors? However, I maintain that it still has a positive intent, and that positive intent should be reflected in a context of survival. So why does the brain overanalyze negative relationships that have already finished and they're gone and go through the detritus? Your brain wants to keep you safe. It doesn't really care about happiness. You need to get over that. You need to deal with the fact that the engine you're running Your genetics, your DNA, your biology doesn't really give a fuck about happiness. It cares about health, not to the extent that it makes you happy and full of self-esteem and light and joy. It cares about health to the extent that it keeps you alive and breeding and procreating. It's one view, it's one model of reality. I'm just giving you options for thought here. So if we accept that, even momentarily, just as an intellectual idea, just as a toy to pick up and then put down, if we accept that you're basing your thought patterns and your decisions on survival, a negative, nasty relationship breakup is a very painful experience. Now, the monkey brain is trying to map where the pain is in the environment. So then it goes, I'm a girl for a second. Pretend I'm a girl for a second. I'm this girl. All men are dangerous. All men are bad. All men are abusive. All relationships are bad. Love is bad. Love doesn't exist. Love isn't real. And then it will go, and those beliefs can form. We can shatter those beliefs. We can redress them and change them. That's not that difficult to do. But the brain won't stop until it's had answers to certain questions like, why did my ex-partner behave like that? Why isn't he trying to make this better? We split up 2 months ago and he's not pursuing me. He's not trying to make it right again. Why was my partner so cruel to me? Why was my boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, whatever, so dismissive of me? And here we come to some painful truths that I would recommend you take on if you've been in a negative relationship. 2 very painful, difficult truths. One makes the second one even worse. Yay! Okay, so the first painful truth we have to deal with is your view of who your partner was when you were going out with them might have been wrong. It might have been inaccurate. I'm not throwing rocks here. I've done this plenty of times myself. My last 2 long-term relationships, I couldn't have got the person I was with any wronger. Yes, I still had a psychology degree. Yes, I was still a master practitioner of NLP. I didn't know who I was going out with and I didn't know what I was dealing with until after the relationship. Your brain is gonna fight like fuck not to accept that reality. And here's the second truth. Nobody wants to admit that they've been going out with an absolute psycho. It's a terrifying, disgusting, repellent experience to realize how dreadful a human being you could have been with. And the next level, the part 2 of it is, your brain's now going to say, how can I trust you, me, the entity, to not do that to us, the entity that you represent again? So your brain is now trying to do its due diligence. It's trying to do risk management. It's trying to do, if we analyze the shit out of this, then this will never happen again. And here's where Connie Ray Andreas flies in. Da-da-da. Superwoman. I call her Superwoman because I read a book of hers in one night. I think the book is just called Parts Therapy. I think it's the book that lays out her system. And I didn't use a therapist, I didn't have anybody with me. I read it in one night, stayed up all night and read it all till morning. And I had what I would call, the closest thing to an enlightenment or a revelation just through reading this book. The model that it operates from is that your brain, or mind, if you prefer, is broken down into parts. And these different parts have different roles. So let's say, for example, my brain has a part that is called Mr. Lover, okay? He's super sweet, super romantic, loves women, just wants to go out there and is totally in love. He's an airy-fairy dude, in love with the idea of being in love, just wants to give himself to somebody, just wants to be in a relationship, blah, blah, blah. Then inside my brain, I have another character, another part, and we'll call him Mr. Bodyguard. And Mr. Bodyguard is responsible for keeping us safe. So what kind of personality traits does a bodyguard have? Well, he's paranoid, he's suspicious, he assumes the worst about everybody, and he doesn't want you to be vulnerable. So these 2 parts are in the brain, and this is a very simplified version, by the way, you really should get the book, but I'm giving it to you broken down. These 2 parts in the brain then become impulses. These weird feelings like anxiety or desire or joy or whatever it is, you want to move over here, you don't want to go over there, whatever it is. In this model of the brain, in this model of consciousness, there's actually different parts that are colliding with each other. So say I see a girl that I like, Mr. Lover wants to go over and chat her up, seduce her, get to know whatever, but Mr. Bodyguard immediately steps in and says, don't do that. It's dangerous. If you do that, you make yourself vulnerable. You know what happened last time. And you will actually experience this. Your brain will kick off a series of communications to you that will form like a mini movie inside your mind. And you can actually sometimes, for some people, it's actually represented as voices. The brain will actually say to you, don't be so fucking stupid. You remember what happened last time, and then it forces you to watch some horrendous movie of all the worst elements of your last relationship and your last breakup. But why is it doing that? It's not trying to hurt you, it's not trying to destroy you, though it can hurt you, and it does hurt you, and it certainly will destroy you if you let it keep doing that. It's trying to protect you. Your rawest impulses are not about happiness, they're about survival, and the brain is kind of like a big, dumb, powerful machine. And it is incredibly powerful. You should respect it for what it is, but don't let it rule your thoughts. So via the Connie Ray Andreas model of parts therapy, what you can actually do is create a negotiation between the parts. And this is how I had a revelation. I had a part inside of me that was represented by, that was one of my parents. And for the egotistic, narcissistic need of this parent needed me to be a certain way by a certain age. And I just had this weird ongoing anxiety that made me feel pushed and made me feel pressured for time, and it just wasn't part of me, and it felt totally unnatural. And it would manifest as this big, huge, black, monstrous, depressive, anxious, very unpleasant feeling. And it was actually, when I read the book and I went through the process of the book, I realized it was actually a driver from one of my parents. It wasn't my program. So then I just followed the parts therapy protocol, whereby you go inside your mind and you actually negotiate with that part of your brain that's pushing you in a direction. So for those of you who are suffering from analysis paralysis and your brain is just pulling itself apart with why did they do this, why did they do that, there's a few things I would advise you to do. One thing is you've got to get to grips with the reality of who that person really is, beyond all the romance, beyond all the intimacy, and beyond all the blinding effects of pair bonding. You'll know what pair bonding is, right? It's how the unromantic scientists define falling in love. And it is a very powerful process, and anything that's powerful is by necessity dangerous. And it does cause our perceptions to go a bit faulty. So you've got to accept that maybe you didn't see that person as they really were. Well, now is the time to see them as they really were. Actions speak louder than words. Forget what they said. Forget the text messages and what they said, you know, face to face, what they said when they wrote it down. Forget all of that. Look at what they did. Look at what actually happened and analyze it from that point of view. You don't have to character assassinate them. You don't have to write them off as a human being, but you have to say to yourself, I will now get a realistic grasp of who this person was, past tense. I'll deal with that. As painful as that will be, I will deal with it and let it go. Remember Carl Jung's admonition as far as psychotherapy goes. He said all neuroses are a direct result of an effort to flee legitimate suffering. I'm paraphrasing there. He said something like that. All our neuroses, all our mental illness, it come about as a result of our inability to accept and go through legitimate suffering. Sometimes life hurts. Sometimes love hurts. But I don't want you to suffer over the wrong things. Your brain pushing you to overanalyze. In most areas of your life, more analysis means more power. But in the area of romance, it really doesn't. What it is that you're trying to do is you're trying to deny two painful realities. Your ex was a dick. They're just not, you know, I know that's not politically correct to say. I know nobody involved in psychology should ever say that about anybody, but the simple fact is, boys and girls out there are some people who are just not very nice. And they don't give a shit about how you feel, and they're not interested in psychology, and they don't watch videos like this, and they're not analysing the rights and wrongs philosophically of the proper way to conduct themselves in a relationship. Why? Because they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit now. They didn't give a shit when you were with them. They didn't give a shit before they even knew your name, and they probably won't give a shit for the rest of their lives. Don't project your values. I have to remind myself all the time. Stop projecting your perspective and your values onto other people. They're not coming from the same place as you, they're coming from a different place. A narc is a narc is a narc. A narcissist is a narcissist is a narcissist. They don't want, need your help. So you've got to get hold of that and go, that's who they were, and that's okay. Then you've got to get hold of the fact that you fell in love with somebody who you find, whose values are so mismatched with yours that you find it repellent. They have no compassion. I know that you care about compassion because people who watch stuff like this and are involved in psychology aren't usually, even those who self-proclaim they're narcissists, they're really not. They might have narcissistic tendencies, but they're really not. Anybody who has compassion is de facto not a full-fledged toxic personality having narcissist. It's just not possible. It goes against the definition of narcissism. So I highly recommend Connie Ray Andreas's book. I highly recommend her model of therapy, which is that we should see conflicting urges inside of ourselves, all having positive intent. You know, in the silly example, in the silly quick example I gave, Mr. Lover has a positive intent, but so does Mr. Bodyguard. You know, if other characters start popping up, maybe it will be one of my parents will pop up, maybe it will be an ex-girlfriend that pops up inside my mind. But these are all, they all have an agenda, and they're all trying to guide me into something which keeps me safe. Most of your weird primal drives are about keeping you safe. If you're incredibly shy, it's about keeping you safe. If you're phobic of certain situations, it's usually about keeping you safe. That's a primary drive. And it's straight back to survivability, because we're not designed for, we're not happiness machines. We are not happiness machines, we're survival machines. So please do take the time to go and check out Connie Ray Andreas's work on parts therapy. Please do be kind with yourself, but firm. You know, you've got to learn to manage your own mind, you've got to learn to manage your own emotions, and you need to develop the discipline like a muscle of controlling your mind. When your mind goes down into this analysis paralysis, you need to start negotiating. When your mind, your brain goes into analysis paralysis, start negotiating with it and saying, look, I know that you are scared that we will make the same mistake again, but we have learned everything that we need to learn from the last situation, and we will not make the same mistake again. If you want to negotiate, whether it's in real life or it's with your own brain, you should give reasons. I know that we won't make the same mistake again because, and then start stacking the reasons inside of your own brain why you won't do that again. Your brain will let off. It will let off, but it takes time. Don't be weak-willed. Don't try a psychology technique once, find that it doesn't work instantly, and then drop it. These aren't pills. These are skills. Ooh, skills, not pills. That's what I'll call the channel. These are skills, and they need to be developed over time, just like a muscle. And the more you do it, the more skillful you get. Parts therapy, fantastic way of doing that, negotiating between different drives in the brain. And you do need to start negotiating with yourself and saying, okay, enough is enough. We've analysed this enough. There's nothing more to be. We've analysed this to death. We're now looking at grains of dust here. There's no evidence of anything here. We're going to have to do what we don't want to do. Accept that that person was not the person you thought they were. Accept it. Say it in your head over and over again. Cry. If you need to fucking cry, then cry. Don't hold back grief. Let's get Freudian for a second here. Any natural urge that is not expressed, but that is repressed and suppressed, is going to manifest somewhere else in a weird, twisted way, and the energy will come out in a way that is perverted. I don't mean sexually necessarily, but it will be a perverted energy. You don't want that. You might need to cry if you've recently split up with somebody. If you're not grieving for them, at least grieve for what could have been, what should have been. Grieve for the dream of being together. Grieve for the future that you had planned together that will now never manifest. I know that hurts. Let that hurt. Let it hurt. Don't fight it. Just let it hurt. It will pass. But it won't pass if you fight. What you resist persists. What you look at will disappear. So be kind with yourself, but be firm with yourself, and be smart, be cunning, be clever. Learn this parts therapy model and apply some of the techniques, and it should give you some relief and some ease from this inner anguish. And don't give in to bitterness. Don't give in to despair. Be strong. That's one of the core values of this channel, and the core values of this endeavour is actually to encourage people to accept pain, to be tougher, to be strong, and to not let it corrupt you or twist you or pervert you in any way, but to actually make you a stronger, clearer, more sane person. Thanks very much for your time and your attention, and I'll speak to you again soon.